Hello, Bigfoot enthusiasts. Scott here from Squatch America. And today we got to spend a day in the woods with Tom and Peggy Seawood, and we learned about Sasquatch and cedar bark.
Good morning, Americans. It's Friday.
I'll show you inside the grove. This is the type of areas I like looking for Sasquatch evidence and for finding them, because back when I was living in bush, this is what we sought out for, was big cedar trees like this. Now you'd have to look around for a few hours usually, but what you'll find is underneath these big trees like this one, you'll find where a bear had made a den years ago, probably 100, 200 years ago, and then they just get it bigger and bigger, and then sometimes you find them where a Sasquatch has actually taken over it, maybe at one Sasquatch or a family, but they'll actually go in there and dig all the tuff out and the rotten wood, and they'll bring the ferns and the hemp and the huckleberry bushes, they'll break them, and you'll find areas like this, and that's usually how you tell, is when you're coming in, you're not going to see any of these huckleberries. So when you see these clear areas where you can see quite a distance, you know that, okay, we better start looking at these trees, and you'll go around one, and lo and behold, there's a big den. It's way too big for a bear. And, we were in one time, and, middle of the night, all of a sudden, boom, a big stick against the side of the tree. It was just one walking by letting us know that, okay, I guess no vacancy tonight. I got to move on. But we were too scared to go out, of course, and we didn't want to interact with them anyway. We were just out in the bush.
You left food out there for them.
Yeah, we threw food for them, and that was about, as far as we're going with gifting. But I like the cedar areas like this because it's an ancient rainforest. It's been logged. You can see the evidence of it. But they left some of these big ones, and, this whole area is just covered. And it tells us that the ground wasn't really disturbed. So there's a lot of flora and fauna in here, they call it, that Sasquatches are coming for. It could be the bulbs, it could be roots, leaves, flowers, we don't know. But when you look at the Indian tribes, and I'm from the Kwakwaka'wakw First Nation from northern Vancouver Island, British Columbia, where I grew up, and my mother's a full-blooded Cree from Saskatchewan, the plains of Canada. And then I've been all over in North America and talking to fellow Indians. I always ask them the questions most non-Indians don't ask them. I ask them, what did your shamans used to do? Where did they learn their trade? Oh, they learned it from the older shaman, would pass the knowledge down. Okay, what about in times of battles or disease or getting killed by something and the shaman's gone? What happens then? And that's when they go, I remember my grandmother telling me that we lost a shaman hundreds of years ago, and the next one to step up and say that I'll take on the role, but he had no knowledge. So he disappeared for months, even a couple years at a time, some other tribes. And what they did is they'd go out into the bush and find an area that would be an area of Sasquatch, and they would learn, get the habituation going, and then they would learn the trade of what are the medicinal plants and remedies that are found in that given area. And so when you study and go with the Omaha Indian tribe like I did in Macy, Nebraska, and you find out that they call their Sasquatch Sitonga, keeper of the medicine. And so I asked the shaman lady when I was there a few years ago, I said, how long do Sasquatches live? And she said 150 to 180, some maybe even close to 200. And I said, how did they get that old? And she looked at me and just shook her head almost in disgust. Aren't you learning anything from what I teach you? Sitonga, keeper of the medicine. They have forgotten more about medicinal remedies in the forest than we will ever know. And she goes, I will go out and I'll harvest plants. I'll take from the root, all the plant right to the tips. And I bring them home and I put them on a table in my backyard, and I put food out like fish or meat or bannock. They like bannock here. And at nighttime, the Sitonga will come and they'll take my food offering, but they'll also take what I have on the table, the different plants, and they'll pull buds off, or they might pull bark or roots or leaves, and they'll sweep everything off the table other than what is good at that particular season. And I said, how do you know what to use it for? She just went quiet. And I knew darn well she was probably speaking with them, because one of the Omaha tribe members that I work with, Lucas White, Peggy had bought a FLIR that we attached to the cell phone, and she told me, I tried it at the house, it doesn't really work. So I left it in my bag for a week. But when I was with Lucas, I said, hey, I got this night vision thing called a FLIR. So we plugged it in and charged it, and we went and downloaded the app and went outside, and we're like amazed that we turned darkness into daylight. And we could see 2 deer at 200 yards away. So we were playing with it, and it would die, and we go charge it up, and we go play with it again. And then finally I was just like, okay, I'm going to sleep. And I went to sleep. And in the morning, or in the middle of the night, I got up and I went outside, and I was quiet. And, you know, being a hunter all my life, I'm stealth quiet. I went out and I could hear chirping. And then I went around the shed, and there was Lucas standing at the edge of the brush in Macy, Nebraska, by the Missouri River, and hardwood, you know, and black walnut trees and scrub, and he was whistle chirping, and something would answer him, and then another one would make a noise, and he'd turn, and he had the FLIR hanging onto it beside him. And that's when I knew that Lucas had an interaction with Sasquatches, and he could communicate with them. And I went back in the cabin. The next morning I woke up, he's sleeping on the couch, FLIR's plugged in, charging up, daylight. And as I'm making coffee, he got up, and I said, I went outside last night and you were talking to the Sitanga. He goes, I have much to teach you, Tom, and much to say to you, but not right now. And they have laws, very strict laws. And then I said, how did you know I was out there? And that's when I could smell you. And that's when I knew. And, you know, just seeing him, how he worked, like at night when we're investigating, he'd be crouched down low and he'd be walking on his hunches, and he'd touch me with his elbow and say something, and he wouldn't look at me. It was almost like he progressed back to feralism, where he was in tune with everything. And here we have Sasquatches on either side of the road, whistle chirping back and forth, mimicking the night bird that I'd never heard before, because I'd never been down that part of the country. And got to know more about Lucas, and he lived out in the wilds of Macy, Nebraska from March until about October every year when it got cold as a kid. Then he'd walk into Macy and be apprehended by the police and the social services, and he'd go to foster care for the winter. And when it warmed up in March, he'd steal food and money and blankets from the people that were looking after him, and he'd go back to Macy, Nebraska and live in the bush again. He was in that bush area every year until he was an adult, from March through until October. And I told him, I said, there's no way a young boy could live out there with the wild dogs and the other animals that are out there. I said, Sitongo is looking after you. And he just looked down. I have a lot to tell you, Tom, but they have laws, very strict laws. And right now he's trying to get a habituation going on where he can get close to them. And he can only get about 60 yards right now, but hopefully he'll get closer. So what I'm basically telling everyone is, if you're gonna Sasquatch investigate, number one, like I heard from you guys, go to your local Indians in that territory. Get their protocol and their permission and their guidance, and you know, everyone's gonna be different. And then at least you know you're welcome into their territory, but also learn how to say, hello, I don't know who you are. I come in peace, I mean no harm, goodbye. And learn the basic Indian language for those things. So that if you go to northern Vancouver Island, if all of a sudden you wet your fingers and get your nose hairs wet so you smell even more, and you smell that sour human body odor like a hockey or lacrosse bag that's 2 years old, you know what that smells like. Well, you multiply that by 20 or 40 and that's a Sasquatch. And when you do get that smell, and you know they're going to be downwind from you, they're going to be smelling you. And that's when in my area you go, yo, Weeksas, Jonaka, hello, I don't know who you are, Sasquatch. Uidas le Jonaka, what are you up to? And I've heard them answer back, Ichman, I'm doing all right. And then they'll say something else and gibberish, and then they'll just move on because you're giving them respect. And that's why when you mentioned about some of the TV shows, you know, I was pretty disgusted when I seen them go out and take sticks and bats and bang trees. When a Sasquatch does that, bang, 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 all he's saying is stop, turn around, go back where you came from. I don't want you here. I'm sleeping, I'm living, I'm here with my family, whatever. And so you're supposed to heed that warning, turn and leave. You know, nowadays I tell people, take your cell phone out and take slow pans with your video. Take a bunch of pictures and do it a couple, 3 times and point up, especially when you got big trees like this. Point up and take video and pictures and go back home, get out of there, analyze what you videotape. And just like my teachings have proven with some of the Indian tribes, they get a hold of me and say, hey, look at my picture I got. And there's a tree peeker, Sasquatch, looking at him, just like the 2 you showed me. And that's the main thing, is learn from the Indians. You know, the Indians have been with Sasquatch since the dawn of our creations. Every Indian tribe in North America, well over 600, have names, stories, beliefs, perspectives, and understanding that you never, ever disrespect a Sasquatch or try to kill it or trap it. You always give it respect. And that's what the whole Sasquatch community, with all of us investigators, enthusiasts, authors, performers, Sasquatch celebrities, I call, you know, people like me, because we're all over, and you guys, because we're all over TV and the internet. And, you know, we need to be the ones that are leaders to educate all. Never harm a Sasquatch or disrespect them, and don't ever think of killing them.
Squatch America, the all-American.